Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. I mean, I'm excited. We're, I guess, as this goes live, we're going to be en route to Mid-South for the first gravel race for me, I guess, or us. Both of us, I guess, are doing gravel racing. You're doing it on foot.
Oh, I guess that's true, yeah.
So we're headed down to this Oklahoma. Is that where we're headed?
Yes. Stillwater, Oklahoma. We're really excited to go to this race. We've heard nothing but good things, so excited to see what all of the hype is about. I will say I am definitely a little on the nervous side. The 50K is fast. I looked at the finish times, and it's definitely going to be a really hard day for me.
Well, I think you've just, for someone who says they don't want to do a road marathon, I think you've signed up for
a road marathon
plus a little bit of extra KMs, but do it on gravel. And I think that's what you signed up. But that's good. I think, remember, these training races are important. I think this is like the thing you need to do is get some of these like a little faster and a little higher competition, and just like it's not your main race, but it's going to be really good for you.
Yeah, just that working hard is going to be really interesting because I realize how ridiculous that sounds when you know that I race 100 milers. But the thing is, like in a 100 miler, I actually feel like you spend the entire race trying very hard to not work hard. Like that is sort of the nature of it. And obviously, yes, it's hard, but it's a different kind.
Well, and maybe we have 3 questions today that we're going to get to. And one is about an endurance test, which maybe we can like even dig deeper on that thought that like you sort of are trying to limit yourself as well. So that's maybe a thing. But I get what you're saying. Like everyone's sort of on there, like they have their all day plus gear. And that's sort of they can pretend, but the pretending ends sometime in around maybe 7 or 8 hours in, if not before, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll unpack that with endurance tests soon. And actually, that's a really interesting question. I think we might actually start with that one.
Okay.
But before we do, a quick thank you to our friends over at Payable Apps for sponsoring this podcast. So if you haven't heard us talk about them before, Payable allows you to take payments within a Google form. So basically, rather than having to set up an online store, a Shopify, a WooCommerce, any of these fancier things, you can just boom, have a website set up within your Google form. You're taking payments. So I know it's Girl Scout cookie season, so I believe there's a lot of Girl Scout troops now that are using this to sell their cookies. Great for fundraising. We use it for our jersey sales.
That's right. Yeah, and our local club uses it for their club membership, and then there's also one of the like youth things, cycling programs uses it just for registration, and you can sort of check like what is your jersey size and how old are you and do you have friends you want to ride with or whatever, and the form gets collected, but then the money gets collected, which is the real thing that Payable connects.
Yes, so if you want to find out more and look at our favorite templates, you can check payableapps.com/athlete, and we'll include a link in the show notes, and I think there's some really good deals on some of the fees and whatnot. So check it out, payableapps.com/athlete. And they only make money if you do, which is the other major bonus. Okay, the first question. What to take away from a quote-unquote endurance test? So this is that MaF test, max aerobic fitness, that was coined by Phil Maffetone.
That's right. He didn't name it after himself.
No.
So it's a test that I use a fair bit. I really like it. And you know, Joe Friel has one that's sort of 30 beats off of your threshold heart rate, not to confuse all these numbers that we'll give you today. But the idea is that it's sort of the top of your zone 2. Zone 2 is very trendy right now, this like endurance zone. It's sort of testing how fast or how many watts can you push when you're at sort of the top of your zone 2 or below your aerobic threshold, this sort of like all day pace. And so how you determine this could be done by lactate or using like gas exchange, or we could just use, Maffetone has a formula that he uses. It's 180 minus your age. And then that's the heart rate you ride at, which has all sorts of problems, but it's comical that a lot of times it actually works out pretty well. And the important thing to remember here is that we actually don't need to be super precise so long as it is an all day, like aerobic, like fairly easy heart rate. We would call it easy, but there's some nuance there. But it's not your max heart rate. It's not your threshold, your FTP, if you will, heart rate. This is like your endurance heart rate. And what we're trying to see is how many watts do you push at that. So if we took someone who's like really, really fit racing in the Pro Tour or some of our top gravel racers, for the men, this could be up pushing 300 watts. For the women, it could certainly be over 200 watts for some of the women. And this is going to depend on body size. We couldn't make this relative with weight, but I like to just, because it's a very personal test, we're not so much super comparing people to people, but more to yourself. What does this look like for you to ride aerobically or at your endurance pace? So that's really what it's assessing. So what I usually do is we find your 75% of max heart rate, or we use that MaF formula to keep it easy here for the listener. And you're going to go and warm up very gradually, and then you're going to bike or run in a very steady manner for half an hour. Some people all use longer, but let's keep it simple. That's what the MaF sort of test is. And you do this sub-maximal. It's pretty boring. It's really steady. And so a runner might do this around a track. How many laps, how fast, how far do you go around a running track or on a treadmill in 30 minutes? A cyclist might do this indoors. It's a pretty simple way to do indoors. We have a loop here in Collingwood around Ottawa for any of the locals, and we do that. And it usually, might be 2.5 times or 3 times or 3.5 times for the really fast people will get up that many. And that's the test. And so we see over time, can we go faster and faster at this aerobic heart rate? So at 140 beats, can you ride faster, further, run faster, further, aerobically? And that's really the assessment. So what we're trying to really see is like it's a sub-maximal way to see progress basically in your aerobic fitness.
Yeah, I've actually been really playing with my endurance pace a little bit lately, I do have to say. I think and this is a conversation that I started like a year ago, I think, with you, where I was saying, I feel like I've been sort of stuck in the same 840-ish mile, 840 minute miles. And it occurred to me recently, now that I'm finally getting back outside and running more consistently instead of skiing and stuff, I was like, oh, I actually can go faster than this and be at endurance pace. Mm-hmm. Like my range is actually probably well into like 750s. And I just default to this 830, 840. So it's something I've been playing around with, honestly, in anticipation of this upcoming race. I'm like, how can I get like to the almost uncomfortable end of endurance? Like I can still breathe through my nose is usually my test. Like, can I do that comfortably for a minute without it being a problem?
Yeah. And so there's that. And that is the question then, is how do you improve it? A lot of people when they start out can barely run or can't run at this aerobic fitness, right? And this would be Scott Johnson of Uphill Athlete is a great book. Training for the Uphill Athlete is the actual name of the book. Scott Johnson, and they had the 2 winners. He coached the male and female winners at UTMB this past year. So he's been on a lot of podcasts and getting a lot of play because obviously that's quite a success. But he's been around coaching people for quite some time for the Skimo stuff. Probably they're popular now too because Skimo got really big with the Olympics. But he also uses the MaF test and is a big believer in it. And they actually call it aerobic deficiency syndrome. If you're this test we're talking about, this pace or speed you can move at this aerobic heart rate, if it's actually a low, I'm trying to remember how he actually does it. I think if it's a lower percentage of either your max heart rate or your threshold or something, if it's low anyhow, then like that's your focus, is to do like a ton of aerobic training, which is what Mafetone would recommend as well, to try and improve that. And certainly we could get into, the tricky thing with this is that you could have someone who's not sleeping well, who's really going hard on coffee, very high stress. And this is obviously going to influence this test. What I'll also have people do indoors when we start doing this, we often will do it once a month, especially in the winter when we're just sitting there anyhow doing zone 2. You can sort of do this test whenever. we'll play with like what's the effective position. If you get into your aero bars, how does this change? If we cool you a lot, how does this change? If we fuel you a little more, how does this change? And then it's actually really interesting to see like the effect of cooling, especially on heart rate, is obvious, but sometimes it's profound how much that indoor trainer environment, especially if you have people who are training, their house is 20 plus degrees. What is that, like into the high 60s, into almost touching 70s, some indoor houses would be. And if you can drop that way down, you're going to have a lower heart rate. So you're going to push more power. And then you're like, wow, I just got fitter by just lowering the temperature, lowering my electricity bill. I actually got faster.
Or if you're in the garage, you could point both fans at yourself and just leave your wife on the treadmill.
You were pretty sweaty today.
Just sweating.
Well, we were getting you ready for Mid-South. It's going to be
warm. I was like about to grumpily be like, could you please turn one of these fans on me? And then I was like, nope, it's going to be hot next week. We're going to do this.
So yeah, that's really what I'm looking for. And like you said, okay, like you can run into the 7-minute miles at sort of this like sustainable pace for an extended period of time. And that is probably, if you got together with a bunch of the fast women here in town and went for a run, the thing is that like a group of runners probably will run. These are fairly good runners, I guess, they're people.
Yeah, we're pretty good.
And so you get to that like uncomfortable endurance pace that's probably dipping into what we might call tempo or moderate for a lot of people.
I think, okay, so that's where it gets interesting for me is I think a lot of people misunderstand zone 2 and think that it's comfortable.
Oh, well, this is the tricky thing is it can feel very different for a lot of people. Like I coach an elite mountain biker and he was like, should I be doing more zone 2? And I said, I mean, like for him, it's going to be up in that 240, 250, 260, 270 watts. It's very muscular and it's very hard, let alone to find places to do it is very, very hard. Running, I would say, is similar. Like the impact forces going faster, like running 6 and 5 minute miles all the time is very tough. So what you'll see is a lot of the expert or runners or cyclists will actually do more zone 2 time. And then you may actually see them doing a bit more tempo, finish a run moderate, something like that. So zone 1, zone 2, just like going by feeling, and then finish the run moderate. And I know that's something your coach David does. I know in Scott Johnson's book, that's what they say. Once you've overcome your aerobic deficiency syndrome, you actually then can do a bit of this sort of a bit more tempo time in the week too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people just get stressed about when zone 2 feels hard, because they don't think it's supposed to. Zone 1 is not supposed to feel hard, but I would argue endurance pace certainly can.
Yeah, I think that's true for fit people for sure. It is a tricky one. And I think Steve Neal, my mentor and coach coming up, has spoken a bit towards this where there's a tough thing when people aren't very fit. I think some of this doesn't apply completely. Like I think we can still do the assessment, but then I don't know if we can always... It's just they can't run. And so there's like, you have to...
It's a very binary. It's a yes, no, or it's like a easy, hard. There is no...
I think so. I think we don't stress so much on it. And then even biking, like once you get someone outside, they have to balance and pay attention to where they're going. Some people, like, it's very hard to even move ahead, staying under whatever you're going to call endurance pace, however you're going to limit that, can be very hard. So you sort of have to make a decision about how we're going to control that. I think that's where sometimes e-bikes might be something that's actually like really letting people get out and actually do zone 2 training for themselves a bit more and get a bit more mileage in and not have to feel like they're going super slow. I think that might be an evolving thing for those people who can get into that and use that. And then certainly the indoor trainer would be another option to try and like get a bit more controlled pace. Maybe when you're starting out, maybe another quick like 30 or 45 minutes of spinning in the week for someone who again, just trying to get more frequency of the week. And I guess to close this off, like the question sort of was like, how do I improve this? Like usually what you're looking for is like, are you getting a significant amount of endurance in the week? So if we can increase the length of any rides, that's a win. Frequency is actually like a huge driver of this test, because we know that like even a day or two, everyone's probably experienced your heart rate is high if you take too much time off. So if you don't train very often or frequently, consistently, you have like you're off for 2 and 3 and 4 days in a row, this is going to be very hard to make progress on this assessment, and probably in cycling. So that would be frequency, we always say, is like the first thing to go after. And that's for beginners. Usually that is the limiter, is when you start biking, you probably go on a Saturday and you go biking, and then that's biking. And then if you ride more frequently, you're going to find that you get better skill-wise and then also physiologically, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so should we go into the next question?
I think so. Yeah, this is something that you'll see though in every, like anyone I coach, every plan I pretty much make. Most of the plans I make probably have this. Certainly, any of the like Leadville-ish type things will include this. Just as it's another way to get information about yourself, learn about yourself. Molly talked a lot about pacing for these long things. And it's not a sufferfest like an FTP test or a VO2 max test or any of these other things. So it's sort of a nice way to show people that like not every assessment is like, heavy metal. This would actually be best with like some Beethoven or something in the background, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe not Beethoven, but
you got to be super chill. The key is to be like deep breathing and super chill.
Yeah, so don't watch the last like 10K of the women's Bianchi. Holy smoke.
Well, and everyone should watch the Queen Stage
or
podcast.
Listen to the Queen Stage. You could also watch us on YouTube, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely check that out because holy crap. We're recording this on Saturday, so after the race. That race was so ridiculous. So good.
Yeah, women's race for sure. Men's race, boring.
Yeah. No, women's race, we were both shrieking at the TV. I'm trying to be like a casual run. I'm like running off the treadmill. I think I almost fell like 20 times during the last 10K just because of how they're cornering and stuff. And every time they corner, I like lean and I'm like, oh no. Anyway, our next question, actually, I kind of like going into this because we were sort of talking about how the frequency is part of how you improve that aerobic engine. But this next question is maintaining fitness while doing unrelated stuff. So this is actually someone for whom frequency is not necessarily there because they're doing another activity.
Yeah, so they do martial arts. They've sort of they were really into cycling. This person is a 50-year-old, in their 50s. And we see this a lot. This is, I think, our people are these consummate athletes. And that's really when you read about the consummate athletes, I always joke that we get the obituaries in my Google alerts for consummate athlete. Sometimes it's our podcast or like a news piece or Molly wrote an article and it says it in the byline. A lot of times it's just some person and, just passed away and they were a consummate athlete. They played a lot of basketball. They were a good sports person, a good sport, and that's the consummate athlete. And so what this person is doing is they're actually coming into, in some ways it's like coming back to like when you were a youth. They say this in long-term athletic development models, where when we're kids, you should play lots and lots of sports. You should go to gym class. You should learn all what we might call fundamental movements or whatever. Then you go through whatever pathway you end up going through. And that's not true for everyone, but anyone who's in a sport. And then we should be coming out to this active for life phase of life. And we can't do everything. Obviously, like we start accumulating injuries and things we're supposed to avoid, movements we need to be careful with. But we should actually be pushing into these different communities. And this is our 4 C's where we say like we like cross training because it gives us access to different communities. That's 2 of the C's. Do you remember the other 2?
Consistency and confidence.
Right. So it lets us be consistent, and then that's going to build our confidence. And I would say in all senses of the word, confidence in our athletic ability, but also our confidence because we have a community that's enforcing and reinforcing or supporting us mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever. So we do like to see people spiraling out into all these different movements because we think it's a good way to live and I think beneficial as well for we'll say for the aging athlete, the adult athlete. So this person wants to know how do they keep up with their cycling friends who maybe aren't doing these other sports when they're just really into a martial art, doing something else. It almost doesn't matter what the other sport is.
Just immediately, I see you already have it written down there. I was like, get an e-bike. Boom. Settled. Yeah.
And I think, again, that's an emerging thing that I think we want to be open to. We can say, they're all evil and that's not a thing. But I think as we get older, I have several people now who this is just one of the bikes in their fleet. And yes, it's a privileged thing to have an e-bike as part of your fleet, but I don't know if it's a lot different than having a $15,000 road bike in your fleet. And what they use it for is they have a couple of friends who are maybe 10, 20 years younger. And that's who they ride with. And then other days of the week, they go out and they ride still their analog bike instead, right? Or their fat bike or whatever other bikes they have. And so it's just another bike in their fleet. In the same way we have our fast road bike and then our slower fat bike, we have an e-bike that slots into that stable. So that's one, but I don't know if that's exactly what this person's asking about, right?
No. So, I mean, you've coached some people who like do martial arts on the side or do other
I think I've actually
activities?
convinced people to do. And I always say I like martial arts, the idea of them, but I'm so adverse to violence that I don't know. I did like a bit of karate as a kid.
You really wanted to pronounce it karate.
I did.
There. You
For
caught
jokes.
yourself.
I don't pronounce things well.
Well, and I remember when we had Shannon O'Grady on, she's with Neurally Nutrition. She's an endurance athlete and also super into, I think it is BJJ, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And again, it doesn't like it's a martial art.
Martial arts,
It's not necessarily like an endurance sport. Like if you want it to be a cross country skier and cycling, like I think those things are going to probably support each other a little closer. But when you get into these other sports, this could be hockey. This could be, different team sports. There's going to be elements that transfer back and forth, but the Venn diagrams of skills and capacities start like separating a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but when she was on, the one question I had for her was just like, how do you punch someone in the face? Because that would really be my limiter. Like how you don't like violence, I just cannot physically imagine myself punching someone in the face.
Right.
I should probably get in a fight at some point. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I might be too old.
Now, I talk about that Venn diagram. Like, there's certainly pros. Like Dan John, when he was on, talked about 3 things that a cyclist maybe should be able to do, and one of them was tumbling. And he was talking more towards like what would a good strength and conditioning program involve for a cyclist. And he said, well, you definitely need to be tumbling because you're going to fall all the time. As far as he understood, I think it's true with mountain biking. At least my experience mountain biking is that I go tumbling down the hill a lot. And so the better you can tumble and roll and save your limbs and make an impact less impactful is going to be beneficial. So I think that's a pro of doing BJJ or any of these martial arts that are going to have different things where you're grappling or tumbling or doing different things like that. But what we want to look for then is sort of like a minimum effective dose. And I think this is where someone who maybe was like a recreational mountain biker and just rode their bike, especially as maybe a younger person, maybe there was actually some genetic ability there too that we maybe coasted through. I don't know about this person. We don't know them. But I'm just saying like that would worsen this thing where like now you don't do it and you're getting older. And the thing is, like, if your friends are like really spending time on it, then it's going to be harder and harder to keep up. And maybe you're also, again, the Venn diagram separating. Someone who's good at BJJ might carry a bit more muscle, especially upper body muscle, that's maybe not going to transfer back to cycling. I think this is very good for health. It is good for the sport that you enjoy, but that is going to make it, again, tougher a little bit, right? So things that I would do is I would try and have like a focused interval session in the week. It could be a group ride, it could be something like that, but I think the bang for your buck would be, especially as we get into that 50 plus, would be we know that strength training and we know that protein, and then we know that high intensity are things that are going to be on the list of like something as we get towards and through menopause, as we go through aging, whether we're looking at the Fast After 50 Joe Friel books, we're looking at the Roar Stacey Sims stuff. This is going to be sort of like the TLDR on those. So I would say, can we leverage any of that strength work? Can we leverage any of the high intensity interval training? So something like 30 minutes. We actually just talked to in our heat episode for women, actually, right? With Normand Richard and Stephen Chung. They talked about the testing they did was a Wingate test. And it was, if you recall, it was like 30 seconds full gas. And then usually it's 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes of rest, just like easy pedaling. And then full gas, 30 seconds. And you maybe do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 of those. Start with less. I often will just use the 30-minute, and maybe we do some other like spinning work or coordination work sprinkled in just to like occupy the time and the mind. But really, the meat of that workout is hit it 4 or 5 or 6 times and then get off. It's really it's bad when it's bad, but it's actually not such a bad session, and that's really well supported. As far as like cardiovascular fitness. And again, for bang for your buck, you can probably fit 30 minutes of indoor training, or I would just do this on the local hill. I would just go out and slam up it. It could certainly be a mountain biking workout if you wanted it to be 30 seconds as hard as you can go, or maybe you're slowly working your way up a climb with a couple of accelerations and then fun descent down. So you could certainly embed this into like a more outside or fun workout too, if you wanted. But yeah, those would be the things I'd sort of look at. That long endurance ride on the sort of complete polar opposite sort of to our previous question, it's going to be so much different than all the BJJ work. So if you did have room in life for like a 90-minute to 3-hour zone 2, we'll call it, endurance workout, even every 2 weeks, that's going to be, again, something that just really supports that aerobic system and is a little different than what this person's doing, because the reality is BJJ can get really intense. It depends how you practice it, but there can also be like almost like HIIT training in a BJJ session.
Yeah. And I think also from more of that like mental goal setting standpoint, if your friends are all super into cycling right now and you're not, I think you just need to get clear on what your goals actually are. If it is to keep up with your friends, then yeah, you're going to need to shift your training. But if your goal actually is to do more with this BJJ stuff, like focus on do more with that, you're enjoying that, and you just want to maintain a little bit of endurance fitness, just kind of generally, maybe it's you go on more of the coffee shop super easy rides or the shorter ones with your friends rather than trying to kind of have it all, right? Like, oh, I need to keep up with my friends who are just doing this, but also I want to do this other completely different sport that has all of these different demands.
Sure. And I do think that is where those, especially even just the low, if your friends aren't riding e-bikes, then the lower power, like, what do they call those? Like the light e-bikes, the Fuel EXE, which is now called, I should know what this is called, Fuel Plus, I think. These are just lighter and not as high powered, but would just maybe give that boost. So it is a solution, especially if the climbs are the main concern, where then it's just sort of like a normal bike on the way down, and who cares? Like, it's sort of checking all the boxes. So if that's an option, but I love Molly's thought that we can also sort of like do a bit of a goal setting. And what that also leads into is like, could we do a periodization where maybe there's a more vigorous training for cycling at one part of the year and you are keeping up? And maybe there's like a couple key rides you really want to be ready for. So that could be 3 months of training where there maybe are a couple extra bike sessions, but then maybe another part of the year is actually really, let's call it the winter, is really heavy on BJJ. It's more convenient to be in the gym and then nicer than being outside. Maybe there aren't even many cycling rides at that point of the year. And then you can really sort of go hard on BJJ or whatever sport you're into at that time of the year. And so that's, I think, the other thing. Like it sort of seems like too serious. Like I know, like sometimes when I present this to people on like a consultation for questions like this, it's like, well, but I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not going to do high intensity interval training on an indoor trainer, and I'm not going to do planning or periodization. But it's like, I mean, but what if your results were better for what you're trying to do? No, it's not the world championships, but you want to be on this ride and feeling great. So those would be the things that I just make sure you're covering the bases with that. Is there anything else that comes to mind for you? Like, I guess fueling might be a thing, but like, I just don't think it's probably the main limiter. Like definitely have a snack when you're out there, especially if these are very long rides. It's okay to definitely do that. But yeah, I don't know if there's a ton else. Yeah, the expectations. Yeah, I think that's our main notes. You want to move on? I guess we will link to the Shannon O'Grady episode. Those for anyone who wants to hear from someone who is a cyclist who does martial arts. But yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Perfect. And then our last question is an etiquette question, which I'm very excited for.
You. Where did it go? We're here at the top.
You're missing it. Go further down.
No, it's this one.
No, it's not.
Oh.
You need to keep going.
Okay.
So passing and being passed in a mountain bike race. So this person is racing in the appropriate category for them, just to be clear. And there's just a bit of an issue when it comes to passing. So happy to let someone pass when they say on your right, on your left, whatever. And obviously it does the same when they are passing people themselves. So here's the question. Yesterday, someone kept buzzing my tire in the corners around the weakest, but I'd pull away in the straights. They got irritated I was slow in the corners, but couldn't pass me on the straights. Since it's racing, I thought I was doing right by playing the tactical game, being ahead when we'd go into the technical bits where I slowed down. Or should I have just let them pass? They never asked to get past or for me to be aware that they're coming past. Otherwise, we'd all just keep stopping and letting each other pass, and might as well just be out for a ride and not racing.
Right. Okay, and I will say,
as someone who crashed the entire field going into the single track at the start of her first mountain bike race, I approve a tactic that keeps the rest of the people from
drill
any
it on the
section
double
of the
track.
course.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and I will say this question came via Instagram, I think just through my Instagram, but you could reach out to Molly or I on Instagram. Or the links are in the show notes for this as well, or on the Consummate Athlete Instagram. And then we also have an anonymous question form that would also be in the show notes and on the website. So you can ask a question just like this one, and you can leave a nice note like this person who said, I like your podcast. Thanks for doing it. That's always nice. We appreciate that.
That is nice.
So this is, I think, a framing thing. I think the like multiple rubbing of someone's tire, like good tight racing, you're definitely going to touch like elbows, or you're going to have a bit of like rubbing. I probably rub two people's tires in a normal mountain bike race, but it's not a big deal. But if this was repeated, then that's a little excessive.
Yeah, that person is in the wrong there.
Yeah, you don't really need to be doing that. So that might just be a one-off. It sounds like most of the time this person's category is actually fairly good and people let everyone buy and it's not a big deal. So this might just be someone who just like is a little odd. Like I wouldn't be above telling the person to just like
stop posing my tire.
Like I think that's like you can have etiquette, but then there's an etiquette that if someone's doing that to you, you can also tell them to stop doing it. But you also want to be careful that you don't get sucked into negative stuff while you're racing, because that's going to really affect your energy levels, unless you're a person who gets really mad and races really well. Maybe you would have really smoked this person. So what I would say is like this actually describes to me like good tight racing. Might not always be exactly like that, but in the elite race, you're usually going to see someone is really good on the uphill, someone's really good on the technical, someone's really good on the downhills, and it can be back and forth racing. And so one of the first things I work with the young athletes I work with is we go around people hard, because a lot of times people will give up if they get past. So this is like our number one tactic. I've given it to you now. Don't use it against people I coach, please. And then the next thing is that we expect that there's going to be some rotation. And for mountain bikers, that's new. But if you've raced cyclocross or you've raced road, certainly, and track, there's all these like, sometimes you're in the lead and sometimes you're not. And I know Mark Batty, who was a good friend, and he raced at a pretty high level on the road. And he also raced mountain biking at a high level. So sometimes he would come to the mountain bike races and he would make fun of us because we were so dumb. We would like sit on the front and try and we're winning. And then he would just out sprint us in the last sprint effort. And he would say mountain bikers are just so dumb sometimes because we always think that like whoever's in the lead for the whole race is going to win, but it's the person that crosses the line. So we want to be careful that we're using decent tactics. So there is that we're okay with a little bit of rotation. So this person could always let this person lead. Okay, fine. If you want to get in front and then rest a bit on the next double track, you don't have to always like maximize your strengths because you don't need to be in the lead at all times. And then maybe you actually get pulled through a couple of nicer lines. You see where actually there's some gaps and maybe you learn something.
Oh.
And then because you've been resting, maybe you can actually really gas them on the next climb and get away enough that then, or the lines on, like maybe they're doing something that you could learn from. So,
or you just come into the finishing straight and you just out sprint them.
Right, exactly. Like so long as they can stick with them, but we need to remember that when we get past it doesn't mean that we're bonking or blowing up. And then B, be open to the idea that like maybe we can like actually use this person. A lot of people find that they can follow and they'll go faster if they're not great technically. And so we can actually like use this person. And that's sort of the other tactic I give the younger athletes I work with is rather than seeing the other competitors as like always a threat, like this person's going to take my first place. It's like, no, they're actually like pushing you. Like they should be pushing you to go harder. And together, this is all boats rise together or whatever, right? Like if we can sort of see them as a challenge, as a like, not a team member, it's not a team member, but it is like, it's a challenge. Like this is good. Like, can you rise to the challenge? Yes or no? It's not the end of the world if you can't, but like embrace that. So that's sort of like a couple things that come to mind. And then I would say if this is going to be happening back and forth a lot, like any good duel should, this is great when you have someone that you're always dueling with in races, is definitely like you're in the better position. If you have a good engines are hard to build, but like cornering skill doesn't take that much to improve. So especially if you're not like already like an elite level rider, so definitely get some skill instruction or like really sort of work on your cornering. Like it can be as simple as laying some stuff down in a field to start, but then also going to some of these areas you're racing and just working on the different elements. Do you want me to go through like what would make cornering better just as a...
Yeah, might as well quick hit that to wrap it up.
So what we usually talk about are the L words with cornering. So can you think of any L words, Molly?
Well, now I'm just thinking of the L word, like the
love?
show.
Love?
No.
They always try and float love on me, the kids these days. So we have low would be one. So can we get lower in the corner, right? A lot of times when you see like the top riders, their faces are almost like on their devices. And there's a bit of a timing element to getting low. It's sort of like as we get into the corner and maybe you're feeling those G forces or whatever you want to call it, being a little lower can help just with traction and again, not sort of like being really high. The other obvious one would be line. So most newer riders just don't get outside early enough. So this is where following a skilled rider, you'll usually start seeing that they spend a lot of time on the outsides of the trail. So they're sort of just always alternating from left to right. And so if we're going on a left-hand corner, they almost do a little turn out. They'd almost turn their handlebars to get to the outside or the right side and then swoop lean through the corner. And so that is really like big once you figure that out. But it's not like I can tell you that, but it's going to take you a lot to figure that out. What are some other L words? Look is like the biggest one. You want to say, look where you want to go, but like that's complicated, but that's the idea. Like usually when you watch someone who's not great at cornering, they're going to be staring at the berm or staring at their front wheel. And so you want to shift your whole body. They say steer with your belly button. Sometimes what the kids will say farting on a berm, like you put your butt on the berm. And so you're shifting your hips, you're shifting your belly button, your torso, your shoulders to look around the corner. And so when we say look, it's like a very involved looking because that leads to our fourth L word is leaning. And usually there's a leaning on the bike, but that's driven by that looking. So we try and really look hard through the corner and get more information about what's around the corner. And usually that helps things. People say, oh, I drag the brakes or I brake in the corner. Well, sometimes it's because you're staring at the berm and you don't know what's coming. It would be logical to put the brakes on if you didn't know what was coming around the corner. But if you can see around the corner, then you might let off the brakes a little bit. That's probably the main ones. Again, you could go, cornering is a lifelong, I think I get better at cornering every year, or think I do anyhow. So it is a lifelong thing, like a lot of skills, but those are sort of like the maybe 3 or 4 L words that might help someone get a little edge in their back and forth racing.
There we go. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up there. We're going to hit the road. If you are at Mid-South and you're listening to this earlier in the week, definitely say hi to us when you see us around the Race Expo. Pre-apologies for the barking dachshund. All right. With that, we'll see you next week. Happy training. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.